The shuttle door opened and cold air rushed in. Stepped onto the metal floor of 7, the largest military training station in the Allied galaxy. She carried a single bag on her shoulder and wore the uniform of a new recruit. Around her, aliens of every shape and size moved through the docking bay. Some had 4 arms, some had scales, some floated instead of walking. None of them looked at her. Humans were new to the galaxy. They had only made contact with alien life 5 years ago. Most species thought of them as children who had just learned to walk. Weak, primitive, interesting but not important. Did not care what they thought. She was here to become a soldier. A tall alien with blue skin and silver eyes approached her. He checked his tablet and said, "Human female, designation. You are assigned to Combat Training Group 7. Follow the yellow line to your quarters." She nodded and followed the line painted on the floor. The hallway was long and bright. Other recruits walked past her, speaking in languages she did not understand. Her translator chip turned their words into sounds she could recognize, but the meanings were often strange. Her room was small. 2 beds, 2 desks, 1 window that showed the stars outside. Another alien was already there. She had pale green skin and large dark eyes. Her body was thin and graceful, almost like a dancer. "You are the human," the alien said. It was not a question. "Yes, my name is." I am. She looked at its bag with curiosity. "What did you bring from your world?" Set down her bag and opened it. Inside, wrapped in cloth, was a sword. The blade was old and slightly curved. The handle was wrapped in worn leather. She lifted it carefully and held it in both hands. Stared at it. "What is that?" "A sword. It belonged to my grandmother, and her mother before her." Tilted her head. "A sword like a cutting tool for close combat." "Yes." Made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Interesting. The instructors will find that very amusing." Said nothing. She placed the sword on her bed and began to unpack the rest of her things. The next morning, all new recruits gathered in the main training hall. The room was enormous. The ceiling was so high that could barely see it. Hundreds of young soldiers stood in neat rows, waiting. At the front of the hall stood the instructors. Most of them were a species known for their size and strength. They stood over 8 feet tall, with thick skin and 4 arms. Their eyes glowed faintly yellow. The head instructor stepped forward. His voice was deep and loud like thunder. "Welcome to the Allied Species Academy," he said. "You are here because your governments believe you have potential. I am here to find out if they were right or wrong. Most of you will fail. Some of you will quit. A few of you might become soldiers." He walked slowly in front of the recruits. His heavy footsteps echoed through the hall. Combat in the modern galaxy is about technology, speed, precision, energy weapons, shields, targeting systems. He stopped and pointed at a table covered with weapons. "These are the tools of war." He picked up a plasma rifle and held it high. "This weapon fires superheated plasma. It can burn through armor, walls, and flesh. One shot can kill any living thing." He set it down and picked up another device. "This is a disruptor cannon. It destroys electronic systems. One blast can shut down a ship." He continued showing weapons, each one more advanced than the last. The recruits watched in silence, studied each weapon carefully, memorizing their shapes and sizes. Finally, set down the last weapon and turned to face the recruits. "Now, I want to see what you brought from your. Step forward one by one and show us your traditional weapons." One by one, recruits walked to the front. A tall alien with red scales presented an energy whip. A floating creature showed a gravity gun. A 4-armed cadet demonstrated a set of plasma gauntlets that covered all 4 of his hands. Each weapon was met with nods of approval from the instructors. The recruits seemed proud. Then it was turn. She walked to the front of the hall. She could feel hundreds of eyes watching her. She reached behind her back and pulled out her grandmother's sword. The steel caught the light as she held it in front of her. For a moment there was silence. Then someone laughed, then another. Within seconds the entire hall was filled with laughter. Aliens pointed at her. Some covered their mouths. Others shook their heads in disbelief. Raised one of his 4 hands, and the laughter slowly died down. He walked toward, each step making the floor shake slightly. He stopped directly in front of her and looked down at the sword. "What is this?" he asked. "A sword, instructor. It is made of steel." "Steel?" He said the word like it was a joke. "A metal blade, no energy source, no targeting system, no shield penetration." "No, instructor." Leaned closer. His yellow eyes studied her face. "Little human, do you understand what plasma does to steel? It melts it. It turns it into liquid. Your blade would be gone before you could take a single step toward your enemy." Did not look away. "I understand, instructor." "Then why did you bring it?" "Because it is my family's weapon. My grandmother carried it. Her mother carried it before her." Straightened up, he looked at the other recruits and spread his 4 arms wide. "Did you hear that? She brought her grandmother's cooking knife to fight a galactic war." The laughter returned, louder than before, stood still. Her face showed nothing. Leaned down once more. His voice was quieter now, almost gentle, but his words were sharp. "Steel cannot stop plasma, little human. Did your species not discover fire yet? Go back to your place, and next time bring a real weapon." Bowed slightly, as was the custom in her family. Then she turned and walked back to her spot in the line. The laughter followed her, but she did not react. She simply stood straight and waited for the session to end. That night sat alone on the observation deck. The stars stretched out before her like scattered diamonds. Her sword lay across her lap. She heard footsteps behind her, appeared and sat down nearby. "I saw what happened today," said. "Why do you keep that thing? It really is useless against plasma." Ran her fingers along the flat of the blade. The steel was cold and smooth. "My grandmother was a soldier," she said quietly. "Long ago on Earth there was a war. She was trapped behind enemy lines with no weapons except this sword. For 3 days she fought alone. She killed 17 enemy soldiers before rescue came." Was silent for a moment. "With that blade, how is that possible?" Because she understood something that those soldiers did not. A weapon is only as strong as the person who holds it. Technology can fail. Guns can jam. Batteries can die, but steel. She lifted the sword and looked at it. Steel remembers. It remembers everyone who held it, every battle, every drop of blood. It does not forget. Looked at the sword with new eyes. "Your people are strange." "Yes," agreed, "we are." She stood up and sheathed the sword on her back. As she walked toward her quarters, she passed by a group of cadets. One of them made a cutting motion and laughed. Kept walking. She had nothing to prove with words. The time for proving would come later. And Steele remembers. The weeks passed slowly. Each day brought new training. Each night brought new bruises. Learned quickly that the academy measured everything. Speed, accuracy, reaction time, power output. Every recruit was ranked and the rankings were displayed on screens throughout the station. Everyone could see who was at the top. Everyone could see who was at the bottom. Was always at the bottom. In ranged combat she scored last. The plasma rifles felt strange in her hands. They were light, almost weightless, and they had no recoil. She was used to weapons that pushed back, weapons that felt alive. These felt like toys. In tactical simulations, she scored near last. The computer systems moved too fast for her. By the time she understood the battlefield, the other recruits had already won. In weapons proficiency, she was dead last. The instructors did not even bother to grade her sword work. There was no category for ancient metal blades. The other recruits noticed. Of course they did. In the mess hall, they whispered when she walked past. In the training rooms, they laughed when she failed. Some were cruel on purpose. Others simply ignored her as if she did not exist. One day, a cadet named blocked her path in the corridor. He was massive, even for his species. 4 arms like tree trunks, yellow eyes that burned with amusement. "Human," he said, "I heard your planet has no real technology. Is that true? Do you still live in caves?" Looked up at him. "We have technology, we just do not forget our history." Laughed. History is dead. Only the future matters, and in the future you will fail. Your species will always be at the bottom because you are weak, you are slow, you are soft. He poked her shoulder with one thick finger. "And you bring swords to plasma fights." Did not move. "Are you finished?" Smile faded slightly. He had expected fear or anger or tears. He got nothing. "Watch yourself, human. The galaxy has no room for primitives." He walked away, continued to her quarters. That night she did not sleep. Instead, she went to the empty training halls. The lights were dim. The rooms were silent. She was alone. She drew her sword and began to practice. The forms were old. They had been passed down through her family for generations. Each movement had a name. Each name had a meaning: rising moon, falling leaf, river over stone, dancing crane. She moved slowly at first, feeling the weight of the blade, then faster still. Her feet whispered across the floor. Her sword cut through the air with a soft singing sound. She practiced until her arms burned. Then she practiced more. While she moved, she thought about what she had learned in the academy. Plasma weapons had a charging time of 0.3 seconds before each shot. Energy shields needed 0.5 seconds to recharge after blocking an attack. Targeting systems could be confused by sudden changes in direction. Armored aliens had weak points at the joints, the neck, and the back of the knees. She practiced closing distance. She practiced sudden changes in direction. She practiced finding weak points in invisible enemies. The next night she returned, and the night after that, and the night after that. Sometimes came to watch. She would sit in the corner, saying nothing, just observing. "You move like water," said one night. "I have never seen anything like it." Stopped and lowered her sword. Sweat dripped down her face. On Earth we have an old saying: the soft overcomes the hard, water wears away stone, wind bends the strongest tree. But plasma is not stone, it is fire. Fire can be dodged, fire can be avoided, fire needs fuel and fuel runs out. Raised her sword again. "I do not need to stop the plasma, I only need to reach the one who fires it." Was quiet for a long time, then she nodded slowly. "You are not what I expected, human. Neither is my planet." More weeks passed. Rankings did not improve. The screen still showed her name at the bottom. The other recruits still laughed. But something was changing. Her movements became faster. Her eyes became sharper. She began to see patterns that others missed. The way a recruit shifted his weight before attacking. The way an instructor glanced at a target before firing. The tiny delays in every weapon system. She said nothing, she showed nothing, she just watched and learned. Then came the sparring evaluation. Instructor stood in the center of the combat arena. All recruits were required to fight one opponent in single combat. The matches would be ranked. The rankings would affect their final scores. "When I call your name, step forward and face your opponent," announced. Standard rules. First to disable their opponent wins. No killing blows. Begin when I give the signal. One by one, the matches began. Fought. Plasma clashed against shields. Energy crackled through the air. Then called out, "Human, you will face." A murmur went through the crowd. Was undefeated. He had won every match in his time at the academy. He was twice size and 4 times her weight. Stepped into the arena with a smile on his face. He activated his plasma gauntlets. Blue fire surrounded all 4 of his fists. Stepped forward. She drew her grandmother's sword. The crowd laughed. Even some of the instructors smiled. This would be over quickly. raised his hand, fighters ready. Crouched low, all four arms spread wide. I am going to enjoy this, human. Said nothing. She held her sword in both hands, the blade angled slightly downward. Begin. Charged, his plasma gauntlets burned bright. His targeting system locked onto's position. His first punch flew forward, fast enough to break stone. It hit nothing but air. Was not there anymore. She had moved the instant he started his attack, not backward where he expected, sideways, low, under his guard. His targeting system tried to adjust. It needed 0.3 seconds to recalculate. Only needed 0.2. She was behind him before he could turn. Her sword flashed once, twice. The first cut sliced the cable connecting his gauntlets to their power source. The second cut found the gap between his armor plates, just above his hip. Roared and spun around, swinging all four arms, but was already moving again. She ducked under his blow, rolled, and came up on his left side. Her blade pressed against his throat. Yield, she said quietly. Froze, his yellow eyes were wide. His plasma gauntlets flickered and died, their power cut. Blood seeped from the wound at his side. It was not deep, but it was enough. For a long moment no one moved, no one spoke. Then's voice broke the silence. Match over, winner. The arena was silent, no laughter, no whispers, just silence. Lowered her sword and bowed to her opponent, as was the custom in her family. Then she turned and walked out of the arena without looking back. Behind her slowly sank to his knees. He stared at the ground, unable to understand what had happened. The match had lasted 11 seconds. That night sat on her bed, cleaning her sword. The blade had a small stain of purple blood on it. She wiped it away carefully. Sat on her own bed, watching. The whole station is talking about you. Let them talk. Watched the recording of your match 7 times. He did not say anything. He just watched it again and again. Continued cleaning. Good, maybe he will learn something. Smiled. It was the first time had seen her smile. You really are strange, human, but I think I am starting to understand. Understand what? Nodded toward the sword. Steel remembers, and today it reminded everyone. Looked at the blade. In the dim light it almost seemed to glow. She thought of her grandmother, young and fierce, fighting alone in a distant war. She thought of all the hands that had held this weapon before her. Yes, she said softly, it did. She sheathed the sword and lay down to sleep. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new tests, new enemies. But for the first time since she arrived, smiled. Let them bring their plasma and their shields. She had something older, something stronger. She had steel that remembered. Graduation day came on a cold morning. Stood in line with the other cadets who had survived the training. There were fewer of them now. Many had quit. Some had failed. A few had been sent home with injuries that could not be healed. Instructor walked down the line, handing out assignment orders. When he reached, he paused. His yellow eyes studied her for a long moment. Frontier Colony 4, he said, placing the orders in her hand. It is a small outpost on the edge of Allied space. Not much happens there. Thank you, instructor. Did not move. He seemed to want to say something more. Finally, he spoke in a low voice that only she could hear. You proved something in the arena. I do not know what it means yet, but I am watching. Bode moved on. 3 days later, she arrived at 4. The colony was small, just a few thousand people living in a cluster of buildings surrounded by farmland. The planet was green and peaceful. Mountains rose in the distance. 2 small moons hung in the sky. The colony had been named after the first human ambassador to the allied species. It was a symbol of friendship between humans and the galaxy. Many humans lived there, along with aliens from a dozen different worlds. Found her brother waiting at the landing pad. He was taller than her, with kind eyes and gentle hands. He worked as a combat medic. "Sister," he said, hugging her tightly, "I heard about your match at the academy. Everyone did. In 11 seconds. The whole fleet is talking about it." "It was nothing special." Laughed, "Nothing special. You beat an undefeated with a sword. The recruiters are already using it as propaganda. Humans are tougher than they look. That kind of thing." Shook her head. "I just did what grandmother taught us." "I know," smile faded slightly. "I think about her too every day." They walked together into the colony. The streets were clean and quiet. Children played in the parks. Farmers worked in the fields beyond the walls. It was peaceful, almost too peaceful. The military base was small. Only 50 soldiers were stationed there. Commander, a gruff old with scars covering his skin, ran the operation. He greeted with a suspicious look. "So you are the sword human," he said. "I have read your file. Impressive arena record. Terrible scores in everything else." "Yes, Commander. This is a quiet post. We patrol, we watch, we maintain peace. There is no need for swords here." "Understood, Commander." Grunted. "Good. Do your job, stay out of trouble." For 6 months, nothing happened. Patrolled the borders. She trained with the other soldiers. She practiced with her sword every night. Life fell into a simple rhythm. She became friends with some of the local soldiers. A young named Myra, who reminded her of a human named who had grown up on the colony and knew every path through the mountains. An old veteran named who had fought in 3 wars and had nothing left to prove. Worked in the medical center. He healed wounds and comforted the sick. He was good at his job, patient and kind. Was proud of him. Sometimes at night, they would sit together and look at the stars. They would talk about Earth, about their grandmother, about the family they had left behind. "Do you ever think about going home?" asked one night. Shook her head. "Earth is in the past. This is where we are needed now. I miss the rain. The real rain, not the artificial storms they make here. I miss the mountains, the ones with snow on top." Smiled. "Maybe someday when the galaxy is safe, we can go back." "Maybe." But the galaxy was not safe, and safety was about to end. The attack came without warning. Was asleep when the first explosion shook the colony. She was on her feet in an instant, her sword in her hand. Alarms screamed through the base. Red lights flashed in the corridors. She ran to the command center. Other soldiers were already there, their faces pale with fear. Commander stood at the main display, staring at the screen. "What is happening?" asked. Did not look at her. "The Dominion, they have come." The display showed a fleet of warships in orbit above the planet. Dozens of them. Their weapons were already firing. Bright lines of plasma fell from the sky like burning rain. The Dominion was an empire that had rejected the Allied treaty. They believed in conquest, in strength, in the domination of weaker species. For years, they had waited at the edges of Allied space, watching. Now they had decided to strike. "The colony shields?" asked. "Holding, sir, but not for long. Their weapons are too powerful." "Evacuate the civilians. Get them to the transport ships." "Sir, the transports," an officer's voice broke. "They destroyed the landing pads first. The ships are gone." Closed his eyes. For a moment he looked very old. "How many civilians?" 3,000, sir, including children." The room was silent. Everyone understood what this meant. There would be no escape, no rescue, no help. Outside, the sky burned. The shields flickered with each impact. Through the windows, could see columns of descending through the atmosphere. Hundreds of them. Each one carried soldiers armed with the most advanced weapons in the galaxy. "What are our orders, Commander?" asked. Straightened his back. His voice was steady, but his eyes were tired. "We hold the central bunker. We protect the civilians. We fight until we cannot fight anymore. And then we die with honor." The soldiers began to move. They gathered weapons, reinforced positions, prepared defenses, watched them for a moment. These were good soldiers, brave soldiers, but they were not enough. 50 soldiers against an army, plasma rifles against a fleet. She walked to the armory and collected what she needed: extra ammunition for her sidearm, medical supplies, water. Then she drew her sword. Saw her and shook his head. "You are still carrying that thing, against armor, against plasma lances." "Yes." "You will die in the first wave." "Maybe." Commander approached. He looked at the sword in her hand. His face showed something that might have been pity or respect. It was hard to tell. "You know that blade is useless against their weapons," he said. Met his gaze. "Instructor said the same thing, but I am still here, and is not." Stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. "Fight your way, human, just make it count." "I will." She walked to the window and looked out at the burning sky. The first troops were landing at the edge of the colony. She could see their armor gleaming in the firelight. Their plasma lances glowed blue and white. Behind her appeared. His medical bag was over his shoulder. His face was calm, but his hands were shaking. "Sister," he said, "stay alive." "You too, brother." They hugged quickly, fiercely, then ran toward the medical station, turned toward the front lines. The ground shook with another explosion. The shields finally failed, collapsing in a shower of sparks. They roared in triumph and charged toward the colony. Took a deep breath. She felt the weight of the sword in her hand. She thought of her grandmother, alone and surrounded, fighting against impossible odds. "Steel remembers," she whispered. Then she ran forward to meet the enemy. The battle began in fire and chaos. Soldiers poured through the broken shields like a flood. Their armor was black and heavy. Their weapons glowed with deadly light. They moved in perfect formation, each squad covering the others, each soldier a killing machine. The Allied defenders fired back. Plasma bolts flew through the smoke-filled air. Explosions shook the ground. Soldiers on both sides fell. Did not stand in the firing line. That was not her way. She moved through the shadows at the edge of the battle. While the main forces clashed in the streets, she slipped into a maintenance tunnel beneath the colony. The tunnel was dark and narrow. Water dripped from the ceiling. Her footsteps echoed softly. She emerged behind enemy lines. A patrol moved through a ruined street ahead of her. 4 soldiers, heavy armor, plasma lances ready to fire. They did not see her in the smoke. Waited until they passed, then she moved. The first soldier died before he knew she was there. Her sword found the gap between his helmet and his shoulder armor. The blade slid through flesh and bone. He fell without a sound. The second soldier turned at the soft thud. He saw nothing. Then he felt the cold steel enter his side, just below the armpit where the armor plates did not connect. He tried to scream, but his hand covered his mouth. The third and fourth soldiers heard the struggle. They spun around, weapons raised. Their targeting system searched for the enemy, but was already moving. She rolled under their plasma fire. The bolts burned through the air above her head. She came up low inside their guard where their long weapons could not aim. One thrust to the knee joint. The soldier collapsed. One slash across the neck seal. Blood sprayed across her face. The last soldier tried to retreat. She cut him down before he could take a step. 4 soldiers, 7 seconds. She wiped her blade on a dead cloak and moved on. Throughout the colony, the battle raged. The Allied soldiers fought bravely, but they were losing. There were too many, too strong, too well-equipped. One by one, the defensive positions fell. But strange reports began to reach both sides. A squad disappeared in the Eastern District. No distress call, no survivors, only bodies with blade wounds. A patrol was found dead in the marketplace. Their armor had been cut open like paper. A heavy weapons team vanished near the water treatment plant. When reinforcements arrived, They found the crew dead and the weapons destroyed. The commanders did not understand. They had no reports of Allied reinforcements. Their sensors showed nothing, yet their soldiers kept dying. In the central bunker worked without rest. The wounded arrived in waves. Burns, plasma injuries, broken bones. He treated them all, one after another, his hands steady even as exhaustion clouded his eyes. Between patients he heard the reports, impossible reports. "There is something out there," a wounded soldier gasped. "I saw it, a shadow with a blade, it moves too fast to track." "They are scared," another said. "I heard their communications, they think the colony is haunted." Smiled grimly, he knew the truth, but he said nothing. Commander studied the battlefield from the bunker's command center. The tactical display showed the advance. It showed the remaining Allied positions. It showed the growing number of enemy casualties in sectors where no Allied forces were present. "Who was doing this?" he demanded. Who had arrived at the colony 2 months ago as a communications officer, pulled up the sensor data. "I cross-referenced the reports with security footage. There." She pointed at a grainy image on the screen. A small figure moved through the smoke. A blade flashed in the firelight. "The human," whispered, "the sword human." "Her name is," said quietly, "and she is buying us time." In the Eastern District stopped to rest. Her arms ached, her legs burned. A plasma bolt had grazed her shoulder, leaving a painful burn. Another had scorched her hip. But she could not stop, not yet. She drank water from a container she had taken from a dead soldier. She checked her sword. The blade was chipped in 2 places. The edge was dulled from cutting through armor seals, but it was still sharp enough. She thought about her grandmother. How had she felt alone behind enemy lines fighting an army with nothing but steel and will? Had she been scared, tired, ready to give up? No, she had never given up, and neither would. She stood and moved toward the next target. By nightfall she had killed 32 soldiers. Her uniform was torn and stained with blood, some of it her own. Her sword arm trembled with exhaustion. Every breath hurt. But she kept fighting. They adapted. They began moving in larger groups. They set up motion sensors and patrol grids. They brought in hunting beasts with thermal vision. Adapted too. She learned to move slower, more carefully. She learned to use the shadows and the smoke. She learned which patches of ground were too hot to walk on and which were safe. She set traps, a tripwire here, a collapsing beam there. She led patrols into dead ends and killed them in the darkness. The soldiers began to whisper about the ghost in the colony. Some said it was a demon from human legends. Others said it was a malfunctioning robot. None of them believed it was just one soldier with a sword. But it was. In the bunker, worked to send a message to the Allied fleet. They were jamming most communications, but she found a narrow frequency that might get through. "Station, this is Colony 4. We are under attack by forces. Civilian population 3,000. Military casualties heavy. Requesting immediate reinforcement." Static silence. She tried again. "Station, please respond. We cannot hold much longer. There is a human soldier holding the line. She is fighting with a sword. I repeat, a sword. She has killed over 30 enemy soldiers, but she cannot last forever." More static, then faintly a voice. "4, this is Station, we read you. Reinforcements are being deployed. Hold your position, help is coming." "How long?" A pause, then 4 hours. His heart sank. 4 hours. In 4 hours, everyone in the colony might be dead. She looked at the tactical display. The forces were closing in on the bunker. Only a few Allied positions remained. And in the streets between them and the enemy, a single dot moved through the chaos. "Yes. Can she hear me?" asked. "Her communication unit is damaged, short range only." Activated the colony-wide broadcast system. It was a risk. They might trace the signal, but needed to know. If you can hear this, help is coming. 4 hours, you need to hold for 4 more hours. In a burning alley, heard the message through her crackling earpiece. 4 hours, an eternity, a lifetime. She looked at her sword. The blade was nearly ruined now. Chips and scratches covered its surface. The edge that had once been razor-sharp was dull and notched. But it was still steel. It still remembered. She raised it one more time and walked toward the enemy. The next 3 hours were the longest of her life. She fought in streets filled with rubble. She fought in buildings that were collapsing. She fought through fire and smoke and blood. They sent their best soldiers after her, elite troops with advanced armor and deadly skills. She killed them all. Her body screamed for rest. Her wounds bled freely. Her vision blurred, but she did not stop. She thought of her grandmother. She thought of her brother. She thought of the 3,000 civilians in the bunker, waiting for rescue. They were counting on her. She would not let them down. As the 4th hour began, she stumbled into the central plaza. The bunker was behind her. The army was ahead. And in the center of the plaza, a single figure emerged. He was the largest she had ever seen. His armor was gold and black, marked with the symbols of high rank. In his hand, he carried a plasma blade that glowed like a captured star. General, commander of the invasion force. He had come to finish the battle personally. He saw standing alone in the plaza. Her sword was raised. Her body was broken, but her eyes were still fierce. Smiled, "One human. You have cost me more soldiers than any army. Tell me, little creature, why do you fight so hard for these weaklings?" His voice was barely a whisper. "Because this blade remembers everyone who held it, and none of them ever ran." Laughed, "Then you will die like them, forgotten, alone." He raised his plasma blade. It hummed with deadly power. Raised her grandfather's sword. The steel was chipped and stained, but it was ready. The final battle began. The plaza burned around them. Moved first. He was fast for his size, faster than any had fought before. His plasma blade cut through the air in a wide arc. The heat from it singed her skin even before it came close. She ducked and rolled. The blade passed over her head. She came up striking, aiming for the joint at his elbow, but was ready. His free arm swung down and caught her across the chest. The impact sent her flying. She hit the ground hard and tasted blood in her mouth. "Impressive," said, "for a primitive, but you are slow, tired, broken." He walked toward her slowly, enjoying the moment. "I have studied your kind, humans, weak bodies, short lives, inferior technology, yet you survive. You spread across your world like a disease. You conquered species bigger and stronger than yourselves." "How?" Pushed herself to her feet. Her ribs screamed with pain. She raised her sword again. "Because we do not quit." Laughed, "Noble words, but words do not stop plasma." He attacked again. His blade was a blur of light and heat. Blocked, dodged. Each impact sent shocks of pain through her arms. Each near miss burned her skin. She could not match his strength. She could not match his speed. But she could read him. Fought with arrogance. He swung wide, leaving openings he believed she was too weak to exploit. He stepped forward when he should have guarded his flank. He watched her sword when he should have watched her feet. He was a warrior used to winning. He had never faced an enemy who refused to die. Let him push her back. She stumbled, fell, rose again. She let him think he was winning. She let him grow confident. And she watched, she counted, she waited. His plasma blade needed time to recharge between swings. Just a fraction of a second, almost nothing. But it was there. A tiny pause in the light, a tiny gap in his attack. She counted his swings. 1, 2, 3, 4. On the 5th swing she moved. Instead of retreating, she stepped forward. Into his guard, inside the arc of his blade, too close for him to swing again. His eyes widened in surprise. He tried to bring up his free hand to grab her. Too slow. Sword drove upward. The steel was dull and chipped. It should not have been able to cut through armor, but she was not aiming for the armor. She was aiming for the gap. Just below's chin, where the helmet met the neck guard, there was a thin line of exposed flesh. It was barely visible, less than a centimeter wide. Most weapons could not have found it. But was not using most weapons. She was using steel that remembered. The blade slid into the gap. It pushed through muscle and bone. It found the place where life meets death. His plasma blade fell from his hand. It hit the ground and sputtered out. His massive body swayed. His eyes, full of shock and disbelief, stared down at the small human before him. "How?" he whispered. Pulled out the sword. Blood sprayed across the plaza. "My grandmother killed 17 men with this blade," she said. "You make 38. Fell, the ground shook with the impact. For a moment nothing happened. The battle continued around them. Fire burned, soldiers fought, the war went on. Then the soldiers saw their general fall. They stopped, they stared. They saw the small human standing over the body of their greatest warrior, a bloody sword in her hand. And they ran. The line broke. Soldiers retreated to their commanders screamed orders that no one followed. The advance became a rout. The army that had been minutes from victory fled in terror. Did not chase them, she could not. Her body had nothing left. She sank to her knees beside's body. The sword fell from her fingers. She looked up at the sky and saw the first Allied warships breaking through the atmosphere. Reinforcements, finally. "You came," she whispered. Then everything went dark. She woke in the medical center. The lights were soft. The bed was warm. Her body was wrapped in bandages and connected to healing machines. She tried to sit up, but gentle hands pushed her back down. Rest Sister was beside her, his face tired but smiling. "You have done enough." The colony. Safe, the retreated. The fleet drove them out of the system. 3,000 civilians survived because of you. Closed her eyes. Relief washed over her like a wave. The others. All alive, wounded but alive. His voice cracked slightly. "You saved them, you saved all of us." She felt tears running down her face. She had not cried in years. Grandmother would be proud. She would. They sat in silence for a long time. Outside, the sun rose over the colony. A new day, a day they had almost not lived to see. 3 weeks later, a ceremony was held at station. The great hall was filled with soldiers and officers from across the Allied fleet. Screens showed the ceremony to billions of beings across the galaxy. It was the largest military gathering in decades. Stood at attention in the center of the hall. Her wounds had healed, though some scars would remain forever. She wore a fresh uniform with new medals on her chest. Behind her, in a place of honor, lay her grandmother's sword. The blade had been repaired by the finest craftsmen in the fleet. It gleamed under the lights, sharp and clean once more. Commander stepped forward. His voice was carried across the hall by speakers. The Battle of Four should have been a massacre. 50 soldiers against an army, civilians with no escape, no hope, no chance. He paused. But we did not account for one thing. We did not account for her. He turned to Private. In the span of one night, you killed 37 enemy soldiers, including General, commander of the invasion force. You disrupted their advance. You broke their morale. You held the line until reinforcements arrived. You saved 3,000 lives. He picked up a small case and opened it. Inside was a medal made of silver and gold, shaped like a star with 6 points. "It is my honor to present you with the Star of the Alliance, the highest military decoration in the Allied fleet. You are the first human to receive this award. You will not be the last." He pinned the medal to her chest. The hall erupted in applause, but barely heard it. She was looking past the crowd, to a figure standing in the back of the hall. "Instructor." He stood alone, his 4 arms folded across his chest. He did not applaud. He did not smile. He simply watched. Then slowly, he raised one hand to his forehead in a formal salute. "Returned it." The applause continued, but between them, a silent understanding passed. Steel had proven itself, and would never laugh again. After the ceremony, returned to Earth. She had not been home in 3 years. The ship landed in the hills outside her family's village, where her grandmother was buried. She walked alone to the grave. The stone was simple, marked only with a name and 2 dates. The grass around it was green and soft. Knelt beside it, she laid the sword on the headstone. The blade rested against the stone, gleaming in the afternoon sun. "I used it, grandmother," she said softly. "I carried it across the stars. I fought with it against enemies you could never have imagined, and I brought it home." The wind rustled through the trees. Somewhere a bird sang. "You were right," steel remembers. It remembers every hand that held it, every battle, every sacrifice, and now, she touched the blade gently. "Now it remembers me too." She stood up, was waiting for her at the bottom of the hill. He waved once, a simple gesture of love and patience. Looked at the sword one more time. Then she picked it up and sheathed it on her back. "But we are not done yet," she said to her grandmother's grave. "There are more battles ahead, more enemies, more people who need protection, and I will be ready." She bowed once deeply in the old way. Then she turned and walked down the hill to join her brother. Behind her, the sun set over the mountains, the same mountains her grandmother had known, the same sky her ancestors had watched for centuries. Humanity had joined the stars, and the galaxy would remember. In the distance, a new star rose above the horizon. It was a ship carrying soldiers to the next battle. Somewhere on board, young recruits were training with plasma rifles and energy shields. And somewhere, a story was being told. A story about a human who had stood against an army with nothing but a sword. A story about steel that could not be melted. A story about will that could not be broken. The story spread across the galaxy. It was told in barracks and cantinas, in schools and academies. It became a legend, a myth, a warning. Never underestimate the humans, the galaxy learned. They carry old weapons and older memories. They fight when they should run. They stand when they should fall. And their steel remembers. Always.